An accidental fire breaks out at the Triangle Shirtwaists factory, a clothing factory located on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors of the Ash Building in Lower Manhattan. The most deaths occur on the 9th floor, where the owner has locked one of the only 2 exits, apparently to discourage pilferage. The cause is probably a still-lit cigarette butt landing on a heap of waste rags that had not been properly removed. There's not enough equipment or training to fight the fire. The fire escape is a flimsy ladder that breaks. It burns only 25 minutes, but the fire consumes 146 lives. Tragedy prevails.
When the firefighters arrive, they don't have ladders tall enough to reach the affected floors. Same is the case with the water hoses. The victims are desperate. Many jump from the windows of the 9th floor. Firemen's nets are unable to break their falls. All who jump die.
The people, they're all bodies. It was terrible. We got sick.
My sister was burned to death. She was so badly burned that we couldn't recognize her.
Let's take you back a few years. New immigrant families from Europe continued to arrive in New York City in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They needed work to make a living. The bosses of the clothing industry of the city found cheap labor in them. They were quick to press the women and children of these families into work at the sweatshops of New York City. Here, hours were long, pays were meager, conditions were unsafe, and workers did not have a voice. By early 20th century, the women laborers had organized into 2 unions, Women's Trade Union League and International Ladies Garment Workers Union. On November 22, 1909, Ladies International Garment Workers Union held a meeting at Cooper Union to discuss a strike to demand less hours and more pay. Clara Lemlich emerged as a figure of historical importance when she rose from the crowd, ascended the stage, and delivered a fiery speech urging the workers to strike. This led to a major strike the next day. It is known as the Strike of 20,000.
Strike meant that the strikers could not bring home any of the income from their work at the sweatshops. The rich women of New York, such as Mrs. Vanderbilt Beaumont and Miss Morgan, supported with their money the workers and the unions. The owners of the sweatshops and clothing factories resisted, Triangle Shirtwaist factory owners amongst them. Tammany Hall, a political organization affiliated with the Democratic Party that ran New York City, sided tacitly with the owners rather than the workers. The strike died. Less than a year and a half later came the Triangle Factory fire. One of the most important witnesses to the fire was Frances Perkins, the future Labor Secretary of the United States and a future architect of the New Deal, who at the time was lobbying the state legislature to pass a bill to reduce the working hours of women and children. She happened to be having tea with a friend only a block or 2 away. She rushed to the spot to see the havoc wreaked by the fire. The event shook her to the core.
This made a terrible impression on the people of the state of New York. I can't begin to tell you how disturbed the people were everywhere. It was as though we had all done something wrong. It shouldn't have been. We were sorry. Mea culpa, mea culpa.
A shocked public held a mass meeting on the 2nd of April at the Metropolitan Opera to protest the Triangle Fire. Rose Schneiderman of the Women's Trade Union League delivered an electrifying call to action. A citizens' committee on safety was formed. On the 5th of April, a funeral procession was organized by the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. 500,000 people participated, 100,000 marchers, and 400,000 observers. On the 11th of April, the owners of Triangle were indicted for unlawfully locking exit doors. Although, thanks to the sophistry of their expensive defense lawyer, they were later exonerated, public anger against them was evident at their trial. Recognizing heightened public fury, especially that of women, Tammany Hall seemed to turn from pro-owner to pro-worker. When the Citizens Committee on Safety went to the state government, the lawmakers were responsive. A powerful factory investigating commission was formed. The chief investigator for the commission was Frances Perkins. The commission went beyond just investigating fire safety at workplace.
We went on and kept expanding the function of the commission till it came to be to report on sanitary conditions and to provide for their removal and to report all kinds of unsafe conditions and then to report all kinds of human conditions that were unfavorable to the employers, including long hours, including low wages, including the labor of children, including the overwork of women, including homework put out by the factories to be taken home by the women.
Factory Investigating Commission's recommendations led to 20 laws. Although some industry owners dubbed these laws Ripper Bills, they led to enduring reforms of occupational safety and human conditions.
Now from the buildings of Manhattan to the Sangre de Cristo range of the Rockies, from the bustle of New York City to the hush of a ghost town in southern Colorado. The town is Ludlow, Colorado. Here occurred on April 20th, 1914, a killing of its citizens by the Colorado National Guard, what has gone down in history as the Ludlow massacre. This is where a strike by the coal miners of Colorado climaxed. It is called the Colorado Coalfield Uprising. It began in September 1913 to protest low pay, dangerous working conditions, and corporate control over workers' lives. The miners, under the Organization of United Mine Workers of America, went on a strike against the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company that was owned by John D. Rockefeller, Jr.
Rockefeller, instead of paying heed to the miners' grievances, focused on breaking the strike. He hired strike breakers, armed his company guards, and hired Baldwin Felts Detective Agency to provide men and scare the miners. The strikers were expelled from company housing, and they didn't mind setting up camp colonies, the largest of which was Ludlow. In April 1914, with the permission of the governor of Colorado, Rockefeller started paying the Colorado National Guard to fight the striking miners. As the miners struggled, the legendary American labor activist Mother Jones led a campaign to bring national attention to their demands. Under governor's instructions, Colorado National Guard arrested and imprisoned her in Trinidad, Colorado. This led to even more publicity for the miners' cause when thousands of women marched through Trinidad protesting the detention of Mother Jones. On April 20th, 1914, the Colorado National Guard opened machine gun fire on Ludlow and later set the tents on fire. Of the 22 civilians killed, 13 were women and children. The New York Times reported, "In the holes which had been dug for their protection against the rifle's fire, the women and children died like trapped rats when the flames swept over them."
This ignited miner fury. They launched a counteroffensive and gained control over southern Colorado in just a few days. This had become a war. Governor Ammons of Colorado did not seem to know what to do. The women swung into action. A silent army of 1,000 women, as it was called later, descended on the Colorado Capitol. This march was organized by Dora Phelps Buell, who said, "Let us forget for once that we are ladies. Let us be women." Alma Lafferty, twice elected to state legislature, then president of the Women's Peace Organization, called the meeting to order. State Senator Helen Ring Robinson, the first ever woman senator in Colorado and only second in the whole United States, addressed the crowd. The governor avoided the women all day but was finally forced to meet them. They demanded that he write to President Woodrow Wilson to help in stopping the war. The governor was compelled to comply. This intervention by women proved decisive. Denver Times called it a triumph for women. President Wilson did send in federal troops. Miners chose not to fight them. Peace was restored.
Meanwhile, having been freed from a 26-day imprisonment in which she calls Rockefeller's prisons, Mother Jones went around the country informing the American public of the plight and demands of the colliers in Colorado. As in the 1909 strike of workers in New York, and this one in Colorado too, the winning side was the one with deep pockets. A year out into the strike, the struggling and starving miners had to call it off.
The U.S. Congress investigated the Colorado strike and laid most blame on Rockefeller Jr. The report said, "We believe that he did not desire to arbitrate and in that way end this strike, and one must conclude he would rather spend the money of the company for guns, pay of the detectives and mine guards, and starve the strikers into submission."
In the early 20th century, there were many barriers to what are now considered workers' rights. This documentary shows how women were prominent in breaking those barriers. And in the 21st century, they continue to do so.
Today, women form more than half of the workforce of America, and they continue to hammer down the barriers of gender and class. For example, they keep chipping away at the barrier that keeps women's wages lower than that of men. And if past performance is any predictor of the future, they are bound to succeed.